there was one little brother next to me and then another one after him. And he reached over to me and he was like, Sister Cory, I don't feel good. Maybe like a couple seconds later, I look over and he's convulsing in the pew, shaking, foaming at the mouth. Everybody stood up, everybody freaked out, and I kicked off my heels and I took off running to John Cuss's office. I'm banging on the door. I'm like, missionary, there's something wrong with the brother. And he's like, what's the problem? And I'm like, he had a seizure, missionary. Like he fell out and was like foaming at the mouth and convulsing. And he immediately turned to me and started screaming at me. He's like, are you a doctor? Can you diagnose everybody? Are you Dr. Cory McClellan? Just started ripping into me like I all of a sudden was this target of this situation.
I believe that you had stated that you were part of the kids' room in Maryland. Mm-hmm. If you could kind of talk about the situations that you've experienced while in the kids' room, because it is a topic that's very near and dear to a lot of people, especially who have kids and, you know, the kind of environment that they're bringing their children into. If you could give like a little bit of behind the scenes of some of the things that you've witnessed and experienced.
Sure. So, I took care of the kids in Maryland for like a year, maybe a little less than a year, and they were the older kids. But before I get into that, I'd want to touch base on some things that I witnessed in general, especially during like baptisms. The children in the Church of God when they're little, it's almost like, this is my opinion, it's almost like they're seen as like less than a member, like they're just, because their parents are often told that your child can be your idol, you know, like if you don't if you don't discipline your child, like I've heard in services about like physical discipline, and I've witnessed physical discipline done by the church leader's wife to little children.
What does that mean, physical discipline?
Like hitting, pinching. I've seen her put one little boy in the closet for like punishment, or put hot sauce in his mouth. Like not her children, somebody else's children, even your own children, that's wrong. But, and baptisms can be so unnecessarily aggressive and violent even. There was one specific one that I remember in the house churches way back in 2010. This girl brought her young baby. She was probably like 2 or 3. Maybe she didn't speak yet. And she got baptized. And then it was time to keep the Passover. So for those who don't know, the way the ceremony is you get baptized first. And then immediately after, you have this other second ceremony of the Passover, which is bread and wine. And then there's like a prayer. And then they put all your information in what they call the Book of Life. So anyway, this little girl was now in the room for Passover, and she did not want to keep it. She didn't want to eat the bread. She didn't want to drink the wine. She started freaking out. And John Cuss's wife picked up the bread and like shoved it in her mouth and pushed it down her throat, and then held her nose and her mouth closed so that she would be forced to swallow it. And it was, I remember being so uncomfortable. This was like when I was newish in the church, you know, like I hadn't been in the church for a year yet, maybe. And I was like, I feel like I'm watching a crime. Like the way that the little girl was freaking out. She was obviously did not want to eat this. And this woman is literally holding her mouth and nose closed so that she'll swallow it. And it was horrific to watch because she's like screaming and like kicking, and the mother is holding her down, and Viviana's like they're pushing it in her throat, and then she stops and lets her like swallow it, but the little girl threw it up on the table because she was so distressed. The little girl just threw it up on the table, and Viviana was pissed, so she picked it up out of the vomit and pushed it back in her mouth and shoved it in her throat like with her fingers. It was the worst thing. I've seen that a couple times in like baptisms where children do not want to eat the bread and wine, and they will eat it. Like,
what was the mother's reaction? Was the mother like a member who was there for a while, or what was the?
No, she was new. She didn't stay either. She left. Like she didn't.
Blame her after that.
No, she didn't remain very long in the church, but I was terrified, like just watching it. But the mother was just kind of standing there, She had the girl in her lap, and Viviana was just making this happen. And the little girl eventually ate it, but it was terrible to watch. And I've witnessed a few like that. And that's just baptism. I've heard some other stories during actual Passover, like the children will eat the bread and wine. Like there is no exception. Like even if they don't eat it, the parent has to eat it, even if they threw it up. Like it's disgusting. But that is definitely a practice. I've seen it. I would classify that as abuse in my own personal opinion. And then the way that the children are disciplined, I've seen them be pinched and pushed and slapped. And Viviana I was sitting in the back of the pew, back of the sanctuary in Maryland, and this one little boy was just acting up. And she like shoved him down on the ground in the pew underneath her, in front of her, and put her foot on his head and held his head down on the carpet under the pew, and was just like telling him to be quiet. And I was sitting next to her, and I was like, Viviana, I was like, Deaconess, like she was a deacon. She was like, he's fine. And I was like, to this day, I feel so guilty because I like watched it, like I couldn't, but what can you, it's hard for me to even verbalize now. Like, I feel so guilty, like knowing that I watched these things happen and didn't stop it, didn't like intervene. And I know people will probably judge watching this, but I can't express what the kind of mindset that you're just under. Like you just don't go against the leadership. You just see it as law. Like I don't know how to explain that. Maybe you.
It's hard to stand up. It's hard to speak out, because look what happened for you. Even answering a survey, you got screamed at.
Yeah.
You got made to feel like, this big because you answered a question on a survey correctly. Imagine if you try to correct a leader, you go against a deaconess who's, put there as you're told by God. It's, if you do that, you're speaking against God. And if you speak against God, what's the situation? You're spiritually corrupt. I mean, wasn't there a time where you actually did speak up about
a child,
something with a child, and what was the result of that?
And so, real quick, before you do that, the woman who was holding the child's head down and the one who force fed the bread, was this the same woman?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and she's a church leader.
Is she still in leadership?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, she's John Costas' wife. They're in Washington, D.C. now.
Okay.
I'm hoping that they watch this and maybe they'll just think twice about like their behavior. But anyway, yeah, she's definitely still there. So yeah, eventually I was in the kids' room in Maryland, but I took care of the older, we called it the big kids room. So there was, it was like maybe the youngest was like 6 or 7 and the oldest was I think 14 at the time. And I took that so seriously because I didn't like the way that the kids were treated, when they were little, obviously. So I felt like a sense of like responsibility to make this environment be like, they would be happy to come to church and not scared. And like, we would do fun things and I would come up with these plans. And I loved these kids. Like, I'm not a kid person, but I fell in love with these kids. And they were scared when I first got in there. Like some of them wouldn't look me in the eye. Like they were just afraid to ask a question or
beaten to submission.
Yeah, basically. And I could tell, like, I was like, these kids are traumatized. Like it felt like that even then. So I started making these games and like these activities and putting on these little puppet show plays and reading books and like all this stuff that nobody else did. And I took it really seriously. And anyway, one incident, this was on the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And It's that day, for those who don't know, is a day where everybody has to fast. So it's not a full 24-hour fast that we usually do, or a 72-hour, because sometimes we do a 1-day to a 3-day fast. But on the Feast of Unleavened Bread, it's just until after the second service. And it's, for those who also don't know, in WMSCOG, fasting is fasting, like no food, no water. I know there are some religions that, you can have tea or water or maybe even a banana. I've heard that before. But in Church of God, nothing. So children are fasting too. So anyway, this is after the first service on unleavened bread. Everybody's struggling. And I'm sitting in the back of the pews. We're watching Passion of the Christ, of course, which is a very emotionally charged movie and very graphic. In
with
my
children? You're watching it with the children?
Yes. My personal opinion, I would not want my child watching that. It's way too much. It's literally murder. Like, it's someone being murdered for hours. You're literally watching that. So anyway, that's my opinion. But the kids were there, the big kids. And there was one little brother next to me and then another one after him. And he reached over to me and he was like, Sister Cory, I don't feel good. And I was like, I know. I was like, we're really close. Like, right after second service, we'll get some water and food and you can take a nap. We'll hang out in the kids' room until your dad's ready to go. And he was like, okay. And then I'm sitting there too. I'm like, I know, man, me too. And maybe like a couple seconds later, I look over and he's convulsing in the pew, like shaking, foaming at the mouth, rigid, falling down onto the floor into the pews. And I'm not a doctor, but it looked like a seizure in my point of view because he's convulsing. And so I started panicking. Like, I started freaking out, and I'm like, I shouted in the middle of the sanctuary. I'm like, somebody help me! Somebody, like, help! He's having a seizure, Everybody stood up. Everybody freaked out, and one of the brothers pushed through all the pews, grabbed him. I kicked off my heels, and I took off running to John Cuss's office. I'm banging on the door, and I'm like, missionary. He was a missionary at the time. I'm like, missionary, there's something wrong with the brother, and he's like, what? And I'm like, he's having a seizure. Like, you have to call him, like, right now. Like, I'm panicking.
Did you wake him up?
Probably, because he came to the door really slow, and he looked pissed that I had come to the door so frantic.
Yeah, while everyone's watching Passion, he's taking a nap.
Right.
That would be my guess. My guess.
That's my personal opinion also, but I digress.
Okay, go on.
Yeah, so we run up to the sanctuary lobby, and they had brought the little boy out on the couch out there, and they had already given him some water, and he was laying there kind of coming around a little bit. And he's like, what's the problem? And I'm like, he had a seizure, missionary. Like, he fell out and was like foaming at the mouth and convulsing. And he immediately turned to me and started screaming at me. He's like, are you a doctor? Can you diagnose everybody? Are you Dr. Cory McClellan? Are you able to diagnose everybody? Like, just started ripping into me. Like, I all of a sudden was this target of this situation. And he started rebuking me, like, you think that this is okay? You acting like that, causing a scene. You have to remain calm as a leader. You can't be doing this, blah, blah, blah. If you act like that and cause panic and hysteria, how will the other members' faith be, blah, blah, blah. He's not having a seizure. He's fine. He's just tired, blah, blah. Look, he's fine. He's not, like all this other stuff. And I was like, I couldn't process what was happening. Like, I know what I saw, and so did everybody else. But I'm getting in trouble for, like, alerting people. And by the way, this kid did not have a biological parent in the church ever. Like, this child never had a biological parent in the church. Even his dad was not really his biological father. And his mom was never a member. So I was just, and I'm also thinking, like, liability. Like, what if something happens? The church is gonna, like, I'm thinking of other things too, of course, not just the little boy, and I'm just looking at him like, is this happening? Like, I couldn't comprehend that I was getting in trouble for this situation.
And that help a child in need.
So, yeah, like, why not? Why are you yelling at me instead of calling an ambulance? like, or telling the father to take the son to an urgent care or something. Why am I getting attacked? Like, I couldn't process it. But I was used to getting yelled at by him because he's known for screaming for really.
No, I know him.
Yeah.
Not an easy person.
No.
So, yeah, no, I could definitely see why you would have hesitated to try to say anything to the woman the deaconess who had her, who was abusing some of the kids, because what happens if you would have spoke out? You witness a seizure and then you get gaslit and screamed at for it.